Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to a meeting of the Canyons Board of Education. Today is January 11th, 2022, and we are meeting at the district office located at 9361 South, 300 East in Sandy, Utah. And before I turn the time over to Superintendent Robbins, I would just like to thank the board for their willingness to gather together this evening to receive an update from the superintendent and for the time and attention that we can give to this matter. So with that, Superintendent Robbins, I'll turn the time over to you for a COVID-19 update.
Okay, thank you, President Tini. Well, I wish we were meeting under different circumstances, and so I also want to express my appreciation to the board for being here tonight, and for everybody that's following online. It does kind of feel like Groundhog Day a bit, but I want to first just express my appreciation to our administration team for working on the slide deck and pulling all this data. Unfortunately, we're getting better and better and better at dealing with a pandemic, but the amount of hours, whether it's in our human resources, school performance, ISD, external relations, there's just been an enormous amount of effort in really providing the data to help drive our decisions. And I think that's been a cornerstone in all of our decisions that we've made in addressing the pandemic. And I think back to when the pandemic first started and we really didn't have a map or any way of knowing how to make decisions or how to go about this. And it just is another reflection on just the tremendous amount of work that's done by so many in the district. And so it's my part to share with you a current update on where we're at. I don't think it's any secret to anybody that things have changed recently. And so it's brought us to this night. If I can get the slide deck up. So okay, so really this is just a state of our current operations. From the beginning of the pandemic, the board and the district have had a very clear goal to keep our schools open for in-person learning. And if you remember from the start, really it's been a balance of supporting our students' academic needs, their social, emotional needs, their mental health needs, as well as their overall wellness needs. At the same time, balancing that with the safety not only of our students, but also of our employees in the district. And I think it goes without saying that that's been a challenge, but we've risen to that challenge. And if you remember, toward the middle of 2020 and 2021, the state adopted our protocol as well for their own. So it has been successful in really keeping our promise to our students throughout. But there's some new pressures that we're now facing that are different from the beginning. And we always, we knew from the start that there may be variants that could change the landscape. And we're currently in that very situation. With rising COVID case counts, this has been a change than what we've normally experienced, especially with this type of acceleration. We're also seeing increased shortage in supplies. Over the last year, we've seen supply chains, and it's in a lot of different product, but there's a slow process in getting the necessary products that we need. And in this case, it's the testing kits needed to do COVID testing. And that's not just being experienced in Canyons, but across the state and the country. We're also seeing, because of the rapid rise in COVID case counts, increased student and employee absenteeism. We've seen Omicron really is moving at a much faster and higher transmissibility than ever before. It may not be as severe as Delta or some of the other variants, but it's definitely spreading at a rapid pace, and we can demonstrate that with some of the data. Along with that, the other change is staff and labor shortage. And this is being experienced again across our entire country and economy as we try to grapple with the pandemic, is staff shortages. So those are some of the changes and new pressures. But again, I just want to reiterate our commitment to our students to keep in-person learning while supporting students and parents' choice for online, or depending on what's best for them. So just a few, I don't want to rehash these too much, but I think it's important to understand, what are we actually doing and what have we done? So as this process has unfolded, essentially what we've taken is a real targeted and precision approach. As you know, in addressing the pandemic, we've really tried to move away from a one-size-fits-all and really target our school sites that experience increase in cases. And so that calls for those tiered level responses, increasing in restriction as case counts move up and down. And to this point, I feel like that's been very successful in keeping our schools open for students. We've also enacted district level measures along the way, and you can see some of those. One currently that we're excited about is district-wide booster shot clinics, and I think that starts this week. So really appreciate Steve and our HR team working on that. But you can see throughout some of the district level measures, we've tried to cut back on professional development and training. As you know, one of the issues, and we'll demonstrate that, is substitute teachers. That right now we're very short on filling some of those requests. So we've tried to use those mitigation strategies, as well as following as close as possible the health orders, which we're now under the county requiring face masks in an attempt to try to mitigate spread. So at the end of the night, really, my objective is really to be thinking about adding a few more tools to the toolkit to address the current situation with COVID. But we have many already at our disposal, and we've utilized these throughout the pandemic. So a little bit about the legal landscape, because I know there's a lot of questions about, and I'm sure the board's experienced this. I appreciate many emails since the county health director issued the mask mandate about who actually has the authority to do so. So I just want to kind of just review real quick, and if there's some legal questions at the end, our counsel's here with us, Dan Harper, he can help field these. But essentially, if you recall, in the 2021-2022 legislative session, in House Bill 107, it established the protocol for the upcoming school year in addressing COVID. Unlikely, at the time, I don't know that they could fully foresee Omicron and what this might look like, but I think it was really with the intent to keep schools open and do the best that we can to deliver on our educational needs. But it also lays out very clearly the test to stay protocol that the district has utilized as a mitigation strategy, as well as barring districts from making the decision to move the entire district to online or mask wearing. So that's addressed in that part of the legislation. It also defines what in-person instruction looks like, and under Senate Bill 107, it defines it as at minimum 4 days per week of in-person instruction. So continued from that is Senate Bill 195, and this is legislation that gives authority to local county health directors to issue a mask mandate. In that, it talks about county health directors having the ability to address pandemics with restrictions in light of protecting the public's health. So you can see there's some procedural processes that go along with that. The county health director can issue a health order. It needs to be confirmed by the executive, which is the mayor, and also the county council. So that is the process. There was one health order issued once already this year. If you recall, a while back, the county council voted that down. In this case, on Saturday, or last Friday, Saturday, the county health director, Dr. Dunn, issued a second health order for a mask mandate for 30 days. And under Senate Bill 195, it allows for that temporary mandate to go 30 days. And then if it's extended, it would require the legislature to do so after the 30 days. So I think that's important for everyone to understand. This mandate was not issued by Canyon School District. It was not issued by the board. It was not issued by the superintendent. This was issued by our county health director. It does carry the weight of law behind it. The county has chosen to take a more measured approach using an education philosophy toward it. That's probably more focused on educating than compliance, but it does have penalties that are associated with it if it's not followed. So I think it's important for everybody to understand the genesis of this law and statute. So a little bit about what's happening. You can see this is a breakdown from student absences from pre-Christmas break to after Christmas break. And there's some days there that are highlighted. And you can see, obviously, since coming back from winter break, the increase. In our elementary schools, this is especially prevalent, and I'll show you another slide, but we've shown a 95% increase in absenteeism over the past month from in our elementary schools, rising to 2,502 absences in that same time. In our middle schools, a 65% increase in absenteeism, and in our high schools, a 66% increase in absenteeism. And here's the breakdown by each level. So you can see, especially there in our elementary schools, a sharp increase in absenteeism since we've been back from the break. We're also experiencing this in our employees. So you can see here, since returning from the break, especially this past Monday, that we've increased sharply in our employee absenteeism since that time. And this week, I believe we were well over 100 positive cases in our employees. Interestingly enough, too, I might add that we're also seeing more and more breakthrough cases, mostly characterized by those that have received the first 2 vaccinations and not the booster. Although we're seeing that, just talking to Everett, we are seeing that more and more, but most of those are occurring either with unvaccinated or those that have received their first 2, but not their 3rd booster. So we're really excited about the fact that right now, I believe we have well over 600 employees signed up for this first booster clinic coming up. Here's another slide just to demonstrate the you can see there the number of requests for substitute teacher coverage. The thing that I wanted to highlight here is the number of employees covering for those requests. So the green are district substitutes. The blue represents employees, and many of those are aides, they're other teachers covering for each other, their secretaries, their district staff. This past week, we reinstituted our district coverage, asking our district employees at this office to fill slots. So you can see that sharp increase since we've come back from the break. And I think that's really added to, our teachers' workload. And many times if we can't, if our fill rate is low, then what happens is, as you know, then a lot of times those classes are combined. So teachers are picking up, 40 plus students in a class just to make the day work. So I think this is an important slide to pay attention to. In our courtesy COVID test that we've been offering to our students and to employees, you can see after the break another very sharp increase in COVID tests. And this past Monday, we shattered every record in the book at 622 tests that were performed here at the district. The line of cars that was around the district Monday morning seemed endless. It reminded me of lines at Disneyland, but it's just kind of hard to see, right? It was very overwhelming to just see the number of people that were in line to get a COVID test. And since that time, because of the delay in supplies, the county and state has indicated to us that we will only be testing those that are symptomatic now. So this is also a strain on that supply chain going forward. We've really been able to accommodate our employees and our students well, but with supplies dwindling and the demand on test to stay, the state is really hurting for supplies and has directed us to only test those that are symptomatic. You can also see a very sharp increase in positivity. So this past Monday, we jumped to 26%. And since the break coming back, we've been well over double digits on all of those days coming out of winter break. And this is with our courtesy COVID testing that we've done here at the district. So who does that involve? So you can see there by type, the yellow and the green and the red, certified, ESP or admin, and ESP or students, I believe. I can't tell the other, or no, ESP and ESP and certified. Currently, all of our high schools are either at test to stay level or are very near. So you can see the case count as of today. I don't think this is really unprecedented water that I don't think we've experienced this since the beginning of the pandemic. It has seemed like over the last 2 years that for whatever reason, our schools have kind of offset each other in timing and when they've reached certain thresholds. But in this situation, they've all reached that point almost at the same time. So we're working with the county currently right now with the issue with testing supplies. The county has assured me that if we go through with test to stay, that we would be able to get all 5 of our high schools, but it would likely be over the next week to week and a half, maybe longer. And there's really no guarantees beyond that. And we have many of our middle schools and elementaries that are right behind in those counts. So that's concerning. Real quick, just on case counts in the community, you can see the sharp rise in the county versus our zip codes. Just about a couple of hours ago, I looked at our zip code positivity rates with the person-to-person formula. Nearly all of our zip codes are either at 30% or near 30. And at the height of the pandemic, over the last 2 years, about 30% was when we reached our max before we started to see a crest and a decline. So You know, for me, just following that pattern, hopefully, you know, we're not that far away from cresting and then starting to decline. County health indicates that if we follow a similar pattern in East Coast cities that have been in this a little sooner in this surge, that they are starting to see some decline, and we're likely a couple of weeks away before we crest and see decline. So again, back to the conversation about the severity of Omicron and the variant, you can see there many more cases, but fewer hospitalizations and fewer deaths within Canyon's school district community. So, you know, that's a good sign, obviously. And, you know, you take the victories where you can. Hopefully, you know, that trend continues, that we have less hospitalizations and deaths. So coming to the last slide, and just my proposal, asking for some additional tools to deal with this situation we're in. I want to remind the board and take you back to the beginning of the pandemic, when Dr. Webb really worked with us to develop our philosophy and approach. And that was one of disruption, suppression, and return. And if you really think about all of the strategies that we've utilized that have been successful, that's really been our model for success. We know that once we get in this sharp incline and cases begin to trend up, we have to take action and disrupt the virus and do something. For the most part, last year, or during the height of the pandemic, the last 2 years, much of that was around moving schools to online for 2 weeks as the disruptor. And that really mirrored the 10 to 14 day incubation period or window of the virus. Now, the isolation and the quarantine is been moved back to 5 days. As you know, there's a lot of discussion and debate around whether or not that closely follows the science of Omicron. I've read different things about the incubation time period for Omicron being shorter. I don't know if that's just an observation. I don't know how relevant or true that is. However, I think when it comes to thinking about how we deal with it now, I think that may play into that. So then we moved into that phase where the state adopted test to stay model as well. About the same time, if you recall, vaccinations were introduced, and that really brought a sharp decline to our case counts and set us up for the spring. And we moved away from moving schools to online, and we really saw, I think it kind of contrasted the value between in-person instruction and moving the district to fully online. But I think clearly in that data demonstrates the need for disruption and suppression of the virus before we return. And then lastly, Dr. Webb would always tell us to use prudence, to really think about using judgment and discretion in how we go about this. I recognize the emotions and how charged these things are. But again, I would just ask everybody out there, our parents, our students, our community, to just continue to treat each other with respect and kindness. And as we work through this, this is new territory for all of us. And we're trying to make the best decisions that we can, but it just keeps ringing in my ear, Dr. Webb just saying to me over and over, just, take a breath and think prudently through these decisions. You have to remain flexible. You have to remain responsive. You can't get locked in because, as we know, this is a very nasty virus that can change. And so I think we've done a good job with that, as hard as it has been. And I realize, change it really makes people uneasy and it creates a lot of trepidation. But because it's not certain, and that's what we want. But I believe our approach in being targeted has been effective in really keeping the promise that we have to our students. So dealing with this current situation, what I would propose is as a disruptor is a remote learning day next Tuesday, January the 18th. If you think about this opportunity that's in front of us and the challenge with test to stay kits and our labor shortage and everything that I mentioned that's going on, we have this opportunity with Friday being a end of quarter day that's already scheduled for no school. Saturday, Sunday, Monday is a holiday. If we make Tuesday a remote learning day, we would have 5 consecutive days that we would be able to shut our buildings down. And I would encourage those that can work remotely to do so. I know there are some that would need to come in to fulfill their duties, but the more that we can put this on pause and disrupt the virus, the better chance that we have. Now, currently in the test to stay code, it talks about 14 days. I've talked to Dr. Dunn about that, and she recognizes the difference between then and now and what's at stake and the issue with testing supplies and test to stay. Currently, there's over 15 schools in the county that are in the queue for test to stay. So there's really no guarantees that, you know, every school is going to be test to stay in a timely manner. And she approved if we move forward, if the board chooses to do so and move forward with this, then after that 5th day on Wednesday, our case count would reset in Canyon School District. You know, that's no guarantee that cases won't respond and bounce back up. But at this point, I think thinking through all of the strategies and things that we can employ, you know, I would strongly encourage that during that time before we return, if you're symptomatic as an employee or a student, that you would get tested before returning. But if we can commit to that as a community, it may be enough to disrupt it to return and buy us more time. Otherwise, we're facing, you know, some pretty consequential decisions, I think, here in the near future with the rapid rise of cases in our schools. I would also suggest with the absenteeism, our teachers and our staff are now really engaging more and more by the day in dual modality, especially in our elementary schools. And for the most part, across the district, we've tried to maintain our Canvas pages the best that we can. But again, being flexible and responsive in this short window of time, I would recommend that we move to remote Fridays and add the 21st, the 28th, and the 4th, along with the 11th. The health mandate order expires on February 7th, and that would give our teachers the time and flexibility to deal with this absenteeism that's going on, where students are not coming to school and able to access. One of the challenges is that we're maxed in our online program, because you might be thinking, well, maybe it would just be easier for students to move over to online, but we're at the beginning of the semester and our online courses are maxed. So if we did that, it would require to move regular FTE over, which would mean teachers that have been teaching in person up to this time would have to switch over to online. So that would present another challenge. So I think in the short run, and maybe, you know, my thought is by that time, by February 7th, if we start to experience that downturn and crest, that, you know, we would just stay with our normal plan that we had already had in place for those few Fridays that are left. But we're dealing with a different environment at this time. And it also really provides, you know, that opportunity to keep instruction going. At the same time, just backing up to the 5 days, it would offer us an opportunity to do some deeper cleaning in our schools in preparation for that return on Wednesday. So that's a lot in a short amount of time. So questions and thoughts?
Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, board. Questions, thoughts? Should we just go down the row here? Start at this end, Mr. Millerberg, and we'll just go down the row.
Superintendent, not to be terribly negative, but maybe a little bit on that side. Looking at the graph that you put up, I see that coming back from the 16-day holiday reset is when all hell broke loose. And so tell me if you honestly feel like a holiday weekend where people will still be together with family for 5 days after we just had a 16-day reset. Do you really feel like this is going to interrupt the cycle?
Well, obviously there's no guarantees. If it were in a, in a regular, perfect workflow, test to stay would be that intervention. The thing that I'm concerned about is that with the supply chain being what it is, that the kind of the cost benefit in my mind that I'm weighing is doing a test to stay with our high schools at 60, 54 cases and rising by the day 2 weeks from now. Does that really serve any purpose versus taking the risk of the 5-day pause? And I agree, Mont, like I am pleading with our community that we are in a crisis. I mean, this virus is overrunning our schools and it's spreading like wildfire. And I'm just asking people, please pay attention to this. I think, I'm hedging my bet. If people will help us with this, I do think it will interrupt it enough to at least slow it down.
Well, as a follow-up to that question, I know in the past, we've been able to track somewhat where exposures are coming from, and we were fairly confident, at least that's what we said to the public, is that the exposures were not happening at school, they were happening away from school, which then makes me scratch my bald head again and say, are we moving them out of a safe zone into an unsafe zone by telling them to go home and stay home?
Yeah, in my opinion, just, talking with our team, I think this year it's been, especially with Omicron and this recent surge, very, very difficult to tell the origin and where it's actually happening, because we've been without masks for so long, and maybe that doesn't make a difference or does, but this variant seems to, be very non-discriminate in how it attacks and how it spreads. So I can't put my thumb on where it's occurring.
And I appreciate the idea of deeper cleaning, but my understanding is that the virus really isn't transmitting from people touching surfaces. It's an airborne type thing. And so we all love clean schools, so I guess that's okay, but I just don't know if that's really going to be an effective tool either.
Yeah, it may or may not. I think it helps. I don't think it, it may not be at the level that we can really put our finger on that. I do think the fact that we increased to MERV 13 filters has made a difference in circulating air through our buildings. I think that's not been given enough credit throughout this thing, but you're right. It's hard to pinpoint, how impactful cleaning our schools actually has been. That's correct.
Mrs. Tangy, just so you don't have to ask, I am through.
Thank you. Mrs. Schill.
Okay, so I want to make sure I have this clear. So we're not going to do test to stay at the high schools.
No, we still can, but there's no guarantees at this point on supplies.
Okay.
Right now, the county is assuring me, at least for Alta Corner and Brighton that those supplies exist. Beyond that, there's no guarantees. If we do the 5-day break and we reset, all of our schools in the district will reset on Wednesday, the 19th to 0.
Okay. So, I mean, I do understand the disrupting it. I do understand the 5 days. My question is, do we really need that many additional remote Fridays, especially if we're going into February? Because if it's really going to crest, then we may not need that. And I don't know, the thing that keeps going through my head is what we said last year, where we said every day the kids are in school, it's a victory. And so I really do hesitate, doing 7, 8, 9 more virtual days. I do just worry about that.
Yeah, two things, Amber, and I totally agree. I'm the board, myself, as a district, we have championed in-person instruction. We have not seen this level of transmissibility. And I don't know, how much that's impacting our schools. I want to believe that, as Mont's point, that our schools are a safe zone. I think with this variant that it is moving through our schools at a more rapid pace. During the mandate, another thought that I had was virtual Fridays for two reasons. One, the transmissibility. The other is the absenteeism. That's a 95% increase in absenteeism and over 65% in our secondary schools. So our teachers, whether we do it or not, are going to be in dual modality. They're going to be handling students and making sure they deliver instruction both on Canvas and in person. So that's an additional workload. And the other part to that is that it decreases exposure 20%, right? So when we're thinking about the level of transmissibility, adding those additional Fridays would help with that. So I'm reaching and looking for tools that, with the type of variant that we're dealing with, that can help. But I completely understand, and that has been a foundation to our success. I feel like the environment's changed a little bit, at least for this 30 days. And you're right. My thought is if we can get to February and it does crest, then, after the 11th, that last Friday that we have scheduled, then we just go from there. This would expire there, and we would just go back to our normal plan unless things change. But this variant's, been different, seems like by the day or week.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that explanation and a little more information on that. The last thing I want to say is just going along with my other concerns is it's just hard for elementary kids, for the parents of those elementary kids, if we have all those Fridays off. So, I just want us to be cognizant of that decision.
There's no pleasant answers to this. I recognize the negative impact on parents, the economy, on work, on people's schedules and their routines. And I really, as you know, I really didn't want to have this meeting, but here we are, and we have to take this on. But I have a lot of empathy for everybody, because no matter what, it's where it's at, and it's a huge challenge.
So I actually share Michelle's concern about the 3 virtual days. I know, in passing conversation had been suggested 1-3 surprised me. But I do appreciate you sharing your explanation. I do worry about working parents, and we've had some come in, and it's heart-wrenching to hear how difficult that is for them. And so I recognize how tough that is. Anyway, I do have a couple additional questions. So I am curious, in your conversations with Dr. Dunn, what she has said with regard to Omicron, and specifically, and how long it rides out compared to the other variants we've seen. Is there really a shorter duration and symptoms, or what has she said about that?
So No, she has not commented on that. That's mostly been what I've read. CDC, Pfizer, Moderna have put out some information that around that. So it's very speculative on my part. She has maintained through it all the incubation period of 10 to 14 days. And that I think, in fact, one of her statements was that the recommendation by the CDC, and I don't want to misquote her, but if I remember right, it was that the recommendation by the CDC was purely economic. So if I recall, so you know, I'm not sure, Amanda, to be quite honest. I mean, I think, you know, it has been, thinking over the last 2 years, you know, 10 to 14 days in isolation or quarantine, in my opinion, maybe that, you know, maybe that does, you know, supersede the length of the incubation period, and it gives you a couple of days of kind of padding that you've passed, you know, the symptoms and you're no longer positive, and that's great. But at the same time, we know that, you know, students being out that long, it just has such a negative impact, you know, on their well-being, on their academic achievement. And so, you know, there's a lot of pressure points, I guess what I'm trying to say, that may influence that decision. Her comment to me tonight was, you know, with the 5-day and the reset, was, let's try it. I mean, we're in this space where it, you know, it's, the virus is running rampant through the county. And if this is something we could do that, you know, resets, I mean, maybe our cases go up, but maybe it does disrupt it enough to slow it down. But right now it is, you know, burning hot through our communities.
Thank you. That's helpful. I do. So we've had some constituents email us and say we really should be going online for 2 weeks and doing a full disruption like what we did last year. But it sounds as though, and I just want to ferret this out, that under the current laws that we have in place, that's not even an option. Is that correct?
So under the 107 is that we have to offer in-person learning. Under 195, I believe there may be in 107, I can't remember where, but if there is a request, and this is mainly for district-wide, when I talked to Superintendent Dixon about this, the intent, to my understanding, to move to online as a district would require Senate President, Speaker of the House, the governor, and the state superintendent's approval before that could be made. However, on an individual level, for example, Jordan Valley, one of our schools, had 14 staff members positive. Over half the students were home related to COVID. And, you know, they're our most fragile students. So the risk is extremely high. That was more of just when I talked to Sid, she said, I'll alert leadership to that, but go ahead and put them online through the rest of the week, at least until, you know, they can get that under control. So I think it sort of depends, but if we were to move the district to online for 2 full weeks, I'm pretty certain it would require all 4 to be involved.
Got it. Okay. So one of the things I also keep thinking about is this really is all about trying to keep school functioning on some level, right? We have so much staff that are out trying to support them online and in person and the whole 9 yards. It's a lot. And I can't help but think so much of what we're seeing in terms of spread has to do with the fact that it's winter. I mean, we know that the spread happens significantly less when people are outside. Our sporting events have been outside up until now. You know, we've now have indoor concerts. We have a lot of indoor things that didn't happen before. So I'm curious what the thoughts are with regard to other activities in the high school moving, you know, forward through the winter, if there's going to be any adaptation to those or.
So under the current order, activities are still approved. Those that are participating do not have to wear a mask. Those that are in attendance or observing or fans are required to wear a mask. So that's that's where it's at. In our plan, I mean, that's something on an individual basis that we've, tried to address as we've gone forward in balancing our students' social emotional wellness with, trying to address, some of those concerns, whether it's assemblies or field trips or whatnot. But as far as high school activities, they have gone forward. And I don't know about any board members. I have not heard any comment from UHSAA. They seem to stay silent so far on this issue, but in language in the current order, they're allowed to go forward with those provisions.
Thanks. That's all I had questions with. Thank you, Mrs. Oakes. Mr. Wrigley?
Appreciate the opportunity to ask some questions. First off, can you guarantee there will be no other variants for the rest of the year? I'm looking for some, no, probably not. Anyway, hopefully, I mean, there are some, sure. Okay, I've got a sure there. Okay. Anyway, we've had a lot of very concerned emails from different parents from different sides with questions and stuff. So I wanted to just go over some of that and point out a couple of things that I'm realizing. First, on the legal aspect, House Bill 107 says we cannot require face masks. So we've had a lot of people say, we want you to require face masks. I don't understand why you don't do that. I mean, it's pretty much in law. And also, we have some complaints about telling people that we cannot require a face mask for parents. Those are both things that are within the law that we have to do as far as parental rights. Is that correct?
So, if you look at, yes, true, in Senate Bill 195, it does, at first glance, I could see some conflict there. But if you really look at how those are coupled in Senate Bill 195, the county health director does have the authority to issue restrictions with those provisions. However, in those provisions, as I mentioned, it does have space for exceptions, and part of that is a parental signature in that exception. We had, on the first day back, we had about 600 exemptions across the district. So, a little between 1% and 2%, but for the most part, very high compliance across the district. So I think, that's part of it. It also, in their guidance, in the county's guidance, it talks about really using an education approach versus, mask patrol or law enforcement intervention. That it really talks about encouragement and educating on the importance of, mitigating the virus through mask wearing. But yes, the county health director has the authority. County council has not voted on this or taken any action. So this stands as a health order carrying the weight of law with those provisions.
Yeah, so at this point, I think they are in that process. Jeff, have you heard at all if they've finalized that or not? The county council, have they made a decision? I know they were talking about it. I've had a couple of parents say, well, until they vote, I'm not going to do that. But from what I understand is if they don't vote, it stands. They just have to vote if they don't do it.
On Saturday. Yeah, in the language, it took effect on Saturday or Friday night at 12:01.
So the county is very much an educational model in regards to a parent, whether or not you do the mask. Is it educational for the health, for the school district? If we say, because parents are saying, well, just tell them hell no and go forth. What's the ramifications legally of a school district if we violate a health law or a mandate by the state legislature?
It actually, in 195, it does talk about potential penalties, and I can't remember it. If I remember right in the language, it talks about fines and potential charges,
and possibly liability. I would assume it would come with that by violating a health law.
Yes, I've had emails too, suggesting that, but I believe in the rule of law. I don't think it serves anyone's best interest or purpose to be negligent, towards that. It's what it is, whether you agree or disagree. I understand everybody has very heightened emotions. This is a lightning rod issue that we've been dealing with for 2 years, and I fully recognize that. But it's the law, and
So-
we're trying to do our best to help stop this thing, and at the same time, make sure parents have their rights respected.
So even as a board, if we all decided that we just don't want masks, or we're going to go without masks, which is very much a controversy, because I got quite a few parents that want all masks and some family no mask, but we legally can't do that.
I would not recommend that.
That's one issue, but that doesn't seem to be the main issue that's causing problems tonight. The second issue that ties in with the other state bill, Senate Bill 195 on is it the 107 is instructions. The problem is keeping the doors open. So that's the second issue we're dealing with. The mask issue is sort of something that's in public, but there's sort of the silent issue behind the doors. I understand today we had over 20 bus drivers. We couldn't get the kids to school. We have over 90 vacancies in our nutrition department. We can't feed the kids, or we had to go on smaller lunches or whatever because we couldn't provide that. And that we had 200 yesterday, 225
teachers
today.
out. Yeah.
How
So
many?
no, Steve, you're spot on. The mask issue is peripheral to, in my opinion.
What you're
central-
asking for
yes,
is for
what's
the
central
Friday
to
off.
this is increase in spread, labor shortage, and absenteeism. I mean, those three things are really a change in what we've experienced before. I mean, I get the mask issue will continue to, stir, but this labor shortage issue is, I mean, if we can't get some of I have to shout out to our transportation department and our food services, our secretaries. I mean, these people and our teachers, I mean, they're all stepping up to just fill in, where they can. But I unfortunately, I mean, kind of being, canary in the mine is that we're getting to a tipping point rapidly where if we don't have people to provide, those services and education to our kids, then we just can't. I mean, there's just not enough people out there, and at the rate that our employees are getting sick and staying home, it's concerning.
Yeah, and putting double kids in one class only makes more risk for the
Correct.
children.
Correct.
Our staff are being super people to go and volunteer, but if they're not a trained substitute or a teacher, the educational for that child probably is affected, I would guess.
Well, I know as a principal, and it humbles me to understand and respect what our leaders do every day. As a principal, you get that sub report early in the morning, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And when you have X number of classes that you can't fill, that weighs heavy. And then you start to go through this process that, to make sure that the kids have, some level of education for that day. And we're closing in on a situation where there's just not enough people to fill those spots. And maybe this crests and we turn the corner and it goes the other way. But just looking at these trend lines, I think we're probably still in it for a few more weeks.
As far as the Fridays, we had some people concerned about Friday and taking Friday off, suggesting that we don't do that. But at the same time, we're basically going to a dual modality of
Right.
education, as you said, with our elementary kids. Before the other variants had not hit the elementary kids, it looks
Correct.
like it's actually hitting them.
It's
pretty
almost
hard.
reversed. Yeah.
And so we're getting that. So we're getting a lot of kids out. The teachers have to do it. So there has to be sometimes, because our teachers are now 2 years into to a pandemic. They're about totally burnt out in addition to now having to go back on. So the intent of telling us to have another Friday off is to basically say to sort of support the teachers and their burnout.
It's in this temporary response only through February. I would ask that we support them just with the situation we're in. It's an interesting dynamic. The vaccination rate in our elementary students is obviously much lower than our high schools. Dr. Webb would tell me that has a direct reflection on why that is inverse now than what it was before. We're right around 60% vaccination rate in our secondary students. So that probably has some direct effect there. But you're right. I mean, most of our elementary teachers have maintained Canvas, but we've been very laser focused on in-person instruction. Our secondary schools probably have been more adept at developing their blended models, but I think in response just to the situation we're in to get us through February, that I would recommend that so that we can really, especially elementary and secondary, but just beef up, our Canvas pages to make them more robust during this time when students are moving back and forth.
So as the kids are going more to online, it's taking more time for the teachers to put together a quality program for the kids at home. So that's equivalent to what we're getting during, hopefully close to what we're getting during the day. And that's requiring some more time for the teachers to do that. Otherwise, we'll have all these kids at home and we'll be giving lessons that are not going to be sufficient to help them educationally.
Well, if you look at, that I was looking at the data itself, 95% equates, well, I said during that time in elementary, 2,502 additional absences from December 6th to January 11th, 1,013 in middle schools and 945 in the high schools. So, that's a lot of time students are out.
Well, and I understand that a lot of our substitutes are maybe older in years themselves, and we're having a hard time even our list of 500 substitutes coming up with enough substitutes for that. And it's the same thing in all the other districts and stuff.
Yes.
So having the Fridays off as you're proposing is basically option for us to sort of swing for a while to support those kids that are staying at home, or for those parents that choose not to send their kids because they're concerned about them getting sick. It's
correct.
The kids staying home are not always just sick, but they're kids that could be exposed, or kids that parents that don't want them to be there. So it's the quality of education for the kids that are staying at home that we're trying to maintain by doing this.
Correct.
You mentioned several high schools, 5 high schools they're basically ready to go to test to stay. But from I understand, we have several elementary schools and middle schools are getting close to.
Yes. So
it's not just these schools.
No, these are
most of the district.
Yeah, our high schools obviously are outstanding. But if you look at the district COVID page, I believe 5 of our middle schools are right there, and then we have several today. I think, and Jeff can correct me, but 5 or 6 elementaries got their second vigilance letter. So meaning that they went, how many cases is that? Beyond 15? So, we're going to have many more schools in the queue here soon.
So we will have a test to stay probably on 10 or 11 schools probably within the next week or so, without having test to stay.
Right. And I'm worried because in the county, there's at least 15 schools in the queue. And so, to line those schools up and wherever ours fall, the potential that 1, there's not test to stay, but 2, even if we get in the queue, it could be weeks out. I mean, then what purpose does that serve? So,
what do you do when it reaches test to stay and we don't have a test to stay? Do we just keep them there and it goes up higher and higher, or is it, the state doesn't give us any guidance?
That's why, I mean, this proposal of this 5-day would reset our numbers to 0. So thinking ahead, I think we have to go back to thinking about the model that we used before. If it's this 5-day break, now obviously it falls this time in a place that we have a holiday, so it really doesn't have a lot of impact on instruction time. But going forward, if test to stay becomes obsolete because we can't get the supplies, then I think the legislature, or we'd have to reconsider online as an option, as that disruptor. And I don't want that. I'm not advocating for that, but that was the strategy that was, I would say, in that layer of most effective last year or the year before when it was at its height, is using online was an effective disruptor that we employed before we went to test to stay in vaccinations.
There seems to be no ideal solution to this, as has been most the case in COVID since it started. But what you're presenting to us probably is the best solution that we have right now with cabinet and looking at what our limited options are.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I don't know, I'm not excited about doing this. I think a lot of the people that we represent are not excited about doing this. We don't have many options. It looks like at this point, if we continue not doing anything, we won't have any staff to take care of the kids or get the kids there. So this whole thing will be a moot issue. We won't be able to do anything. In fact, we probably won't be able to go online because the teachers will be sick. So this is sort of a, let's give it a try to see if it works.
We're in a tough spot.
And we really do need to depend upon the parents to try to make sure that it doesn't get worse during this period of time. And the mask issue will be the mask issue. We'll see what happens from that. But at this point, it sounds like we will have to enforce by law what is given to us because we don't make that decision not to enforce it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Nybauer?
Thank you, Steve, for that thoughtful discussion. He highlighted a lot of things that we have been emailed about: the decision to mask or not mask made by the county, the decision for soft closure made by the state superintendent, and all of the people that you've already outlined. This is decision with those 5, not with the 7 of us and our superintendent. So we have a few issues here. As I see, we have a labor shortage, which we had before the Omicron virus really is ramping up. So that's been an issue. We have the Omicron virus that's clearly surging right now. We also have also just the issue of excessive absences, which we've had all year long, which has been a problem ever since we've had a change with legislation as far as what we can and can't do as far as consequences when kids are out of class. And so I think we actually have layers of issues here that has kind of gotten us to where we're at. Obviously very concerning with the numbers of COVID going up, but then we also have a labor shortage on top of it. And we also have kids that also are missing school because they're saying, oh, a lot of people are out for COVID. Well, I think I'll skip too. And they're, and I don't get much of a consequence.
Yeah.
So a question for you. I know before, when a lot of these decisions were made, you were consulting with Dr. Webb, and you went and saw and talked to him about the capacity at the hospital. I've read things in the news. I've watched this with what was reported in Europe and other places back east, that it surged before us, talking about how Omicron is even more contagious, but less serious or severe. Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about the hospitalizations in our county? I know you had that on the chart that there's far less than last year at this time, but how are our hospitals doing? Are we?
I have not talked to Dr. Webb directly about that, but I will follow up with him, on that. From the beginning, and even now, we have seen very, very few hospitalizations, especially with students. And I know with employees as well, it's been very, very few that have actually been hospitalized. I think my understanding is currently we do have one employee that is hospitalized from COVID, but it has been very few numbers over the full 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then it's probably safe to say that a lot of these issues we're facing is more about the practical side of how to keep schools operating with this disturbance. That is a larger concern than the seriousness or severity of we're going to have hospitalizations, as opposed to last year. Last year, it felt a lot more serious and we saw more hospitalizations, and this could be a life and death situation.
Yeah, I'm really careful to speculate on that, Holly, because, it affects everyone different. I mean,
Sure.
I know people on a personal level. We had a family friend that was 23 years old that, very healthy, got COVID at the 1st of November and was dead December 3rd. So, I mean, for me to say like, hey, it's not, I mean, the numbers would bear out that it seems that way, but I know, for individual families and people that experience it different, it would be hard for me to really say whether or not, that's there's strong correlation there.
Mm-hmm. So, and that brings me to my next question, because I would agree with you with what you said. I also know people that have gotten severely sick from this. So what's our confidence level or interval with the whole 5-day disruption. It used to be last year, we're saying it has to be 14 days or 10 days. I know the labor shortage and the economy has driven this decision as well, but do we really feel like a 5-day disruption is really important? If we do, then why wouldn't we look at say having the following Monday after this next Friday, a virtual, so we can have a second 5-day disruption? I mean, do we feel strongly that that's really important? Do we need to really think about, hey, let's, do you know what I'm saying? This next week we have your proposal is 2 days of school because we have Monday off. We're going to have Tuesday off. They go to school Wednesday, Thursday, Friday's off. Well, why wouldn't we then have the following Monday and Tuesday off so we can have another 5-day disruption and then go back and not do the last Friday in January and the first Friday in February? Because maybe that 2 weeks of 5-day disruption might be enough. And then, as you were saying earlier, it crests and then it falls. And then maybe February we can get back. I'm just wondering, do we feel strong that the 5-day is really a disruptor? Or
Well, no guarantees. Like
right.
This is secondary to what I would prefer, right? Like what I know is effective is test to stay. That has been, we did that last year. We've ran that now 5 to 6 different times with our high schools, and it has had a direct impact on stopping the virus. Because of the situation we're in, what I'm proposing really is secondary to that. But the one thing that I am very confident in is that we are running out of test kits as a state, and I don't really have the assurance that there's going to be a flow of supply that we can continue that model. So yeah, am I hedging a bet a little bit on 5 days? I think it's still out there for debate on whether or not, that's long enough as an incubation period. But if you really think about the fact that CDC is allowing students to come back after 5 days, there's got to be some science behind that that would indicate that it's shortening. So, I don't bet on the Raiders and I don't bet on this. So.
Okay.
I'd probably lose on both.
Fair enough. I'm wondering about our elementary school kids. So far, after we voted on those virtual Fridays, my elementary school kids have not had anything to do on Fridays. Okay. No worksheets. I've got a kindergarten as we have our ISD director that back there nodding, is such a crucial time for them to be in school and with that repetition and learning how to read. So if we do this, can we have some guarantees that these kids will actually have some practice at home and some things to do, because that definitely has not been present with these virtual Fridays.
We have outlined remote Friday expectations, and it's very clear about that. And I will follow up with our team, to make sure. I'm sorry that occurred, that it's not what the expectation is. And, I will do my best to ensure that we follow through, because I don't, if it's just sit around on Friday and do nothing or not engaged, then we've defeated the whole purpose.
So. And then another question I have is just supports for students that need extra help, students that have dyslexia, students that have special needs. Are we going to allow these virtual Fridays for kids to go in and get help or make up tests, or will no students be allowed on campus?
This is just open for discussion. In the past, that pendulum has swung. In the beginning, it was very firm and strict that we did not allow students. As we got to the point where we went through test to stay and vaccinations, we began, if you remember in the spring, we began to open up more and more. For this situation, considering what we're attempting to do, I would suggest that those supports are done through teleservice and through internet. We have got better and better at that. And I know Misty and her team have really worked hard on delivering those services via iPad. My recommendation would be to maximize what we're attempting to do, is that on Friday and Monday and Tuesday, that those that can work from home do, Students do not come into the buildings. We do the best we can to really kind of shock the system a bit into stopping the cycle. Obviously, the more people are in the building, you know, the more adults are in the building, the more students are in the building, it just increases the opportunity for spread.
So what about pre-scheduled student activities like sports games?
So under the health guidance, those things would be allowed to continue in the evening. So I'm talking about just in the day. And I know that sounds counterproductive. We went through this very discussion in the beginning when the pandemic first started. But under the guidance where it's clear that these activities can continue, with those participating may or may not wear a mask, and those that are there observing wear a mask. So we would just be following that guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then I also want to note on the record that Mrs. Arnold is excused this evening. Mrs. Oakes?
Yeah, just as a follow-up, it's interesting. I have a different experience with the elementary packets and virtual Fridays. Actually, my elementary kid has the most consistent work that's assigned to him. I know because I'm the one sitting next to him, making sure we get through that sucker. So maybe it's a school by school thing. I'm not sure. But I also have a question. So I recognize with the 5-day disruption, we probably shouldn't have any students in school. I also feel very conflicted about the idea of allowing athletes in the building to train and be in those spaces and, you know, gym working out, they're breathing heavily. But what about students with established 504s or IEPs? I mean, those are the ones that I'm the most concerned about them falling behind or being able to connect face to face, because they struggle mightily with online instruction.
Yeah, I'm open to that, Amanda. Like I said, we're taking a shot at this because we're in a crisis and our numbers are where they're at. Like I said, you know, earlier, based on necessity, and maybe that's something that we take on a case-by-case basis. If students, you know, need to come in, or it's part of an IEP or a 504 that we need to follow through. I felt like, you know, thinking about our past strategy, that the way that we handled that, it worked out okay. I think we were pretty nervous in the beginning about what that might look like, but at the same time, you know, it wasn't Omicron. It wasn't just this transmissible, you know, variant that's spreading rapidly. So there's nothing that says we can't, right? And maybe that's something that we take case by case, and if presented that students need to be in the school to receive services, I'm not opposed to that. I just think we recognize the risk, you know, both ways of what we're trying to accomplish in that short window, because this isn't 10 days. We're squeezing this down to 5. So
Right.
Not as much in our favor that way, right?
Well, I am in full support of the idea of this initial 5-day disruption and nobody's there. If at all possible, or as few as possible. But I think when we're adding more virtual Fridays, to take that time and that support away from those vulnerable students.
Not on those Fridays.
Okay.
Those would be just like our regular.
Like regular virtual Fridays. Okay,
yes.
that's what I wanted to
I'm just
clarify.
talking this Friday, end of quarter day.
Through
to
Tuesday. Okay.
Just like we hit it hard the best we can to try to disrupt this thing and stop it.
Okay.
At least slow it down.
Well, and I, in support of kind of what Dr. Dunn said, let's try it and see what happens. It kind of reminded me about the book that Ed Elements wrote of the new school rules, Anthony Kim's book. Like, if it's good enough to try, we don't know if it's perfect. Sometimes you have to go out on a limb and see. And I kind of feel like that's the space that we're in. So I'm supportive of the recommendation by the administration.
Their thoughts? Okay. Many of my questions have already been asked and answered, but I want to go back to this, what the expectation is and what the difference is between what here you're calling a remote learning day, but earlier in the year, the board approved virtual learning days. Is that just two names for the same thing?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got them confused, but there's.
It's fine. I just wanted to clarify that so that parents have an idea of what to expect on those days.
And that's outlined. ISD has that clearly outlined, and we can reshare that on what those expectations are.
Okay. And then I put a big question mark in my notes on that of those 3 additional Fridays on the 21st, just because we've already had the Monday and Tuesday of that same week. And I'm just kind of, can you tell me kind of the value of having a 2-day week
Well,
versus just having 3 days and then a weekend and then a 4-day week and then another 4-day week and then another 4-day week?
no, Nancy, I'm very open to that, and I recognize that. In my mind, I think our goal is in-person instruction, to be there as many days, as many minutes of in-person instruction as possible. I also feel the weight of this absenteeism and this situation with labor shortage and teachers having to really are working dual modality and trying to prepare lessons for students that are home, whether they have COVID or they're fearful or they want to be at school. And just the workload and the stress and the morale, issue that is causing. I recognize that's only 2 days. And, if the board says, hey, we want to go 3 days there, that's totally your discretion. I'll support that prerogative and whatever you want to do. Sometimes, there's a signal in what I'm saying, and that's important too, right? I think the data clearly explains and demonstrates that we're back in that situation where our teachers and their stress level and their ability to deliver in both situations. The one factor too, I think we have to remember is that in previous moments like this, for the most part at that time, because we had regular FTE in online, our ability to shift literally thousands of students back and forth was very easy, right? We had already pulled all of those regular teachers over to online, and that is not existent right now. So we're maxed at about 38 students to 50, between 38 and 50 in our online sections. So we really don't have a lot of room for students that are, wanting to move over. So really, our option is to have them stay home and access through Canvas, which that was not, that really was not as prevalent the first time around than it is now. So that's why I'm really leaning or pushing for those days, but I'll support whatever the board wants to do.
Okay, thank you. I guess it just seems to me like they would have had a virtual day. I mean, if our virtual days really are what we've said they are, which is my understanding just generally is that there's a 2-hour office hours for teachers that they're committed to be available for students. And it's not really synchronous instruction and things like that as how it was more last school year on some of those pivots to online. Anyway, that was just something that stood out to me as
there's one other balance
to ask about.
That is the AB day. So if we go with 3, which is okay, but that will offset AB with one more A day or B day. Then if you go with 3 instead of 2, then that makes 4 with that additional day on the 11th, which would balance A days and B days. So that was the other part. I forgot that part.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wrigley.
Just really quick on that. I understand the ABDA, and we may get more A or AB days, which is with the problem. But my concern is we've already asked the parent to take Friday off of 1 week. Then we asked them, they're taking Monday off because it's a holiday. We're asking them to take Tuesday off because it's a holiday. And then we're asking them to take Friday off. I don't know if employers could be that generous to give that much time off, even if you have time off. I think we probably need to, and so what will probably happen is the kids will be latchkey kids, which is not something that's very healthy. So I sort of support what you're saying in that we may want to go ahead and just allow parents to have 1 day off from 1 week, 1 day off from the next week, and then we skip it and then 1 day off. So we're down to 4 days they could work during the week. Because they only have 3 that 1 week. Because I don't know. My concern would be that I don't know when the parents are going to work and how they're going to work that out. The employers are not as understanding, I think, now as they have been in the past.
Well, understood.
Mr. Millerberg.
Okay, we've heard a lot of discussion. What do we need to do tonight? Do we need a motion? It seems to me that a year ago or so, we authorized the superintendent as our chief executive officer of the school district to make some decisions dealing with COVID. So what do we need to do tonight?
Thank you for asking that. Yeah, what we did a year ago was kind of for the different plan the plan was then ended at the end of last school year. So tonight, and especially if we are considering altering the calendar, I think it's appropriate to have board action. So it would be through a motion. And the superintendent has presented a recommendation, and the board has obviously given some feedback and discussed it. So a motion on this matter is in order.
So do we have a consensus as to what we've settled on?
I don't know that we have. I think we've just now, each of us have had a chance to give our thoughts and comments. So if anyone else would like to maybe take it
Superintendent,
from
you've
here.
taken all these comments in and you said you're flexible. Would you like to outline what you would like to have happen,
So-
or are we back to the original proposal?
Well, my first recommendation would be the first proposal, but hearing the comments with the 5-day and the Tuesday is to go those 3 days and then add the 28th and the 4th with the 11th. And I think that would work too. And that way that goes, that gives parents.
And I think Mr. Wrigley's comment is very, very appropriate.
is.
That you have working parents, that you're requiring somebody to take off work,
Giving them some continuity.
especially with our elementary age kids.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Mrs. Nybauer.
While we were sitting here, I had a teacher actually ask me for clarification. So what is the expectation for the teachers? Are they to go to the building? Can they work remotely? What's
Okay.
that?
On the 5 days, I'm recommending that anyone that can work remotely in those 5 days, this is from Friday to Tuesday, work remotely.
Okay.
The Fridays after that would be our normal, they're at work, they're at the site, our normal virtual Friday. So they're at the site, they're during their normal hours. But for this attempt to stop this thing, I would recommend that if you can work remotely Friday and Tuesday, that you do so. Because I just, if people are in the building and mingling, we want to eat together, we want to hang out. I mean, we're defeating, we really have a shot at this to slow it down. And I think if we don't do what we can, and I would recommend during that time, if you're symptomatic, to get tested. I know it's right now, the lines are just long everywhere. I heard not just ours, but every testing center in the valley is overwhelmed right now. But I think if we take that approach for these 5 days and give it a shot, that maybe we can get it under control. So for that time, work remotely if you can, but I realize for some people, they need to be here. But those additional Fridays, it's just normal. You're at work, and students are welcome to come during that time. I mean, it's just our normal thing.
Okay.
Just a
Thank
quick
you.
question.
Yeah.
Will our clinic here, if we have the testing kits, be open Wednesday? So after Tuesday, if somebody's got some questions, they could test
Yes.
on Wednesday before they come back
They're open
to make
but
sure we don't spread it?
it will be open, but
We have
as I-
test as a question.
we're planning to keep it open. But the issue is right now is that we've been directed to only test those that are symptomatic, because we're the supply. I know that I can't remember the number that we're getting, but if we don't ration it some, we're going to run out. There's no way we can sustain 600 tests a day. I mean, we're going to run out quickly.
Yeah. Well, even if we could do that, if somebody thinks they have something, they're colder. They
Yeah,
got
if
some
you're,
symptoms.
it's up, yeah. It's
Yeah,
on
I
your
mean, it's up
honor.
to them. They come
That's
and say,
right.
I've got some
If they feel
symptoms.
like they have symptoms.
Yeah,
come.
and if we can do that on Wednesday before, we're going to try to, that'll even better set that firewall that we're not bringing everybody back in that's sick if possible.
Thank you. Other things? Mrs. Shill?
Well, I'm just ready to make a motion if that's okay with everyone.
Can I ask one question before the motion's made?
Yes, Mr. Millerberg.
In as much as you're recommending that we have nobody come to the schools on for that 5-day period, are we going to have a virtual board meeting the evening of the 18th?
That's true.
Or are we going to
Um,
cancel board meetings?
Is, I mean, district office though, will staff
It'll be
still be working for
yes, it'll
district
be open.
office, not as,
The
so
district office
you're
will be
just
open.
recommending for the school buildings?
Correct. Yeah, with payroll and some of the district office functions, we've got to be open.
I take that as a no.
So, well, I'm just
No.
clarifying, so board, but
I'll take that
if
as a
we're
no
okay, if
answer.
the district office is open, that Tuesday would be our regularly scheduled board meeting. So,
We could always pivot based upon what the numbers are.
Yeah, I
Yes,
mean,
we
we can
could.
watch it.
we
It-
could
it-
watch.
I mean, it could. Yeah.
As long as we're after it, can we get the
We're after
22nd of
majority vote.
February off as well and extend that to President's Day weekend?
Okay, I will make a motion.
okay,
I'm-
Mrs. Shill,
I move that we approve adding the following remote learning days to the calendar. January 18th, January 28th, February 4th, and February 11th.
can I just clarify? I believe February 11th is
That's
already
on the calendar.
a board approved remote
Oh,
day.
sorry about that.
Okay,
So take that off.
okay, thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion to this motion?
I'd like to have some discussion to this
I
motion.
would like to have some too.
All right, Mrs. Nybar and then Mr. Millerberg.
So we're proposing, the 11th was already off. So are we proposing to not have 4 and only have 3 remote days? Is,
Correct. So the 21st would be a regular Friday.
so the new motion that Amber's making then is Tuesday, the 18th is off. And then,
The-
and then Friday, the 28th, and then the first Friday in February.
4th. Yep.
Okay.
That's it.
Do we want to look at even seeing what happens with the numbers after we have this 5-day before we commit to that? I just am wondering, you know, maybe by the time we get into February 1st, what if the numbers are down and we,
Well, I'm sort of building it within the mandate, I mean, I'm trusting that, you know, the county health's perception of kind of that, when it's going to crest is that it's within that 30 days. So I think it's just for planning and trying to address, I mean, looking at the data and the trend line, I don't see that. I mean, it hasn't slowed down, you know, over the last week and a half. So
Mhm.
I would think we're probably going to be in it for a couple more weeks. And that, you know, we're talking about, you know, through the 11th, and then it expires on the 7th. The order expires on the 7th altogether.
Mhm. Okay. And then also with the buildings completely closed for the next 5 days, that's all our school buildings are closed, locked up from morning until night
No,
because we
so-
have,
No, activities under the guidance,
okay,
evening activities are.
even during your 5 days. Okay. Even when the
5
teachers
days.
aren't there.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Those were my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Millerberg.
Okay. Sometimes it's hard to tell if I'm joking with you or if I'm serious. I want you to know on the 18th, I'm serious as a heart attack. Okay. I would propose that if we are going to meet in person on the 18th, we limit public comment that evening so we don't have patrons in and out of the building
Yeah.
as much, and limit that to possibly not at all or remote only.
Yeah.
And so I would ask Mrs. Schill if she would be willing to amend her motion to include that.
Or I don't know that that's,
Wasn't in the motion.
I don't want to go through all that motion stuff.
right, okay. So Mr. Millerberg, I think that would be kind of a board operations
Okay.
thing that we could
Okay,
just, if we're all in agreement with that, then we can structure the meeting that day accordingly. So,
I think it sends a message that we are serious about what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's true.
let's handle this motion and then we'll just confirm that, that piece of the discussion. Thank you. Okay, any other discussion to this motion? Okay. Sorry. So the motion is that we add 3 additional remote or virtual learning days to this school year calendar. Those dates are January 18th, January 28th, and February 4th.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I will call for a vote on the motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you to all of the administration and the staff throughout the district. I just want to make a comment. I've been thinking a lot of this discussion centers about the idea of capacity. And our capacity is being stretched at this point because of all the factors we've talked about here. But with that being said, the commitment and the desire to provide education to students has not wavered. And thank you for pointing that out. And I'm just really grateful for the amazing folks that we have here in this district who have such huge capacity, and they are sharing that with all of us for the betterment of our students. And I'm really grateful for that. Thank you for that personal privilege. Okay, Mr. Millerberg. So for the board meeting on January 18th, because we are going into this 5-day protocol, and that would be day 5 of the protocol. We have a regularly scheduled board meeting. We can arrange if you prefer to attend remotely, please let me know. We will limit the number of people in the room. So Superintendent, if you could work with your administration on that, and that we will invite the public that wishes to address the board in patron comments to do so virtually.
Okay.
Does that cover the concerns? Okay, yes, telephone, yes. Okay, all right. So does anyone have anything else then? All right.
Can I just,
Oh, yes, Superintendent.
I just also extend my appreciation to the board and to our admin team, to our teachers and our principals, and also to our parents and our students for their patience. And as I've said many times, we're the union, we're together on this, and it's not easy, but I just appreciate the collaboration and relationships in our community. We had our elected officials here today. It was great. They were all there and very supportive of Canyons and our mission. So I'm very humbled and grateful to everyone.
Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent, for all your great work on this. And yeah, it's not unprecedented that we find ourselves in unprecedented circumstances. So again, yes. All right. So with that, meeting adjourned.